Rewind. Root Words is a podcast, a short form podcast, because, we don't have the time. Just unpacking ways that we can build relationships with others, with our students, with our kids, and just one concept, one root word per episode. And so the Rewind is just to take 1 second to pause, reflect on what we have already done in season 1 of the podcast, gearing up for season 2 of the podcast coming in March. I'm so excited for that. And so each week, this is a short series. We only did 5 words in season 1. We're going to do 10. We're doubling it, okay, for season 2. And so I'm just really excited for, all that is to come. So that's Root Words. Again, we're in that space between the science and the people, giving you real practical skills and strategies to use with your students. So for each episode of this Rewind, I start with just sharing a little bit about what I have. Corey got a go ahead, one of my old students. Come on. Tell Corey I said hello. Awesome. So I just want to share 3 quick, points that I mentioned in the podcast, share a little bit of color around the concept, and then I'm going to bring on an amazing guest again, Jocelynn. We share our names. We spell it different because, we're unique, from I Teach Custom to have a conversation. Jocelynn, go ahead. If you're on, go ahead and send me the request now, because from the lives I've been a part of in the last hour, Instagram's been doing some stuff. So I want to make sure that you can send that request on over. Okay, 3 things. Responsibility is what we're talking about. And I love talking about responsibility. My boy, the insightful teacher, Rakim, was literally 10 minutes ago talking about responsibility on D's Teach Me. Oh, hey girl. They were just talking about responsibility, and he mentioned the definition, just breaking down the word responsibility. And I was like, why didn't I think about this? Our ability to respond, right? Our ability to respond. And so my intention with this, and even sharing these 3 points from the podcast, is just to build the capacity for educators' ability to respond to what we are faced with, the things that we are approached with that are indefinite, it's going to happen. But I want to build your capacity for how you are able to respond, your ability to respond. And so I was just inspired by that as well. Okay, number 1. All right, this is deep. It's going to be a hard left. It's going to be a hard left because this first one is deep. I know when I recorded the podcast, that first episode, I was in a really dark place. I was in a really dark place in thinking about our responsibility as educators. I had just watched the documentary, The Trials of Gabrielle Fernandez. Have you heard about that story? A very young boy who got his life taken, and all of the things that led to that and the things that were missed that could have protected him. And then I was supporting a school, and a 3rd grader at that school took their own life. And that was just a very dark time. And so at that time, I was just thinking about what was missed, the adults that were in those children's lives, what happened and what was missed, what wasn't seen. Did someone see something and feel like it was not their responsibility? I'm not going to speak on it. That's not my job. All of these things were swirling in our head. And as educators, we have to know that the protection of our children is our number 1 priority. Teaching them stuff, them learning things, none of that happens unless they are protected. And so it got me thinking about, how educators are trained, how attuned and responsive we are to our environments. And also, this is a little bit deeper, if we are, stifling the opportunities for students to build relationships with each other, that ultimately makes them notice little things that students do with each other that could save a life. So if students don't feel comfortable speaking with each other, they don't have the opportunities to communicate, they'll go on the playground, right? And they still would have friction, or they won't communicate out there as well. I think what is going unnoticed between the slide and the swings? What is going unnoticed there? A student can say a comment to another student and not even get noticed. It doesn't get raised to an adult that can do something about it. So it's what are we doing? What are we doing? How are we teaching our kids to communicate, or are we limiting those opportunities that we can build these protective layers around our babies? So it's just, It gets me every time just thinking about it, because do kids really know how to gently handle those situations? If they feel like, wow, this friend of mine is been sad, really sad, and they've been talking about these different things, do the kids around you know how to gently handle that situation? Do they trust the adults around them enough to be able to go and feel like that is sacred communication that can occur, and that their friend will be protected and not ignored? That takes work. That takes work, right? And that whole experience made me go talk to my own child. And honestly, I had a moment of pause in doing that, because sometimes we think if we have the conversations with kids about deep topics, about big emotions, about big feelings, and potential really scary outcomes, we think we're giving them the idea that they could go do it. Like, we're giving them a scary idea that they could do as an option for them. But it's our responsibility as adults to give them the exposure, because they can save another life and they can save their own life when they feel the things. When they feel those things and experience those things, right? And that's what we want. That's what we want. We want them to have the skills and the mindsets built in those moments. So that's the first thing. We have to have conversations about big, hard stuff with our kids. That's the one, building responsibility within our kids. The second one is building responsibility and trust with all of our kids, so that they feel us, that they feel like they can come to us, right? The next thing in responsibility, that's like a whole loop here. The whole responsibility loop is that not only do they need to tell one adult, they need to tell two. They need to tell two. I told my son, if you ever hear your friends expressing these type of emotions, we want to help. We always want to help. You help by telling an adult, you need to tell me too. Because I'm like, yo, as in the case of the Gabrielle Fernandez case, things were missed. An adult was told, or an adult she noticed things, but there wasn't another adult to check that. So there needs to be a checks and a balance with multiple adults as well, to make sure our kids are being seen, heard, and protected from all angles. So there's a responsibility loop that we just have to uphold, and concerns can't fall on deaf ears. So that's a part of the responsibility. Here's number 2. Okay. Another hard left. We need to manage our expectations about the responsibilities that we put on kids. Okay? We have to stop. You're 9. You should just be able to do this. You're in the 8th grade. It's unacceptable that you can't do this by now. We have to stop that. If we think about not thinking about the person and how they're showing up today, but thinking about people and students as a collection of skills, mindsets, and experiences, right? Then we can take the responsibility as adults to approach the need, right? And not assess the person for who they are right now. So when I look at a student and they're showcasing that they don't yet have the skill to produce right now, then I'm shifting into teacher mode. I'm not shifting into the condemnation mode, right? So I posted about this the other day. Students have to trust that you are a teacher of compassion and not contempt, that you're not going to hold everything against them, but you're on their side of the table, ready to tackle anything that we need in order to succeed and move forward. Okay? So they don't know it. That's a given. They're not going to know it anymore if you talk down about them for not knowing it. The skill's not going to click in. It's not going to click in automatically, right? Sometimes we look at students like they should have fully baked executive functioning skills and organization already built in. We don't even have it built in. It takes we posting Post-it notes all around, like we being Mary Jane, if you know about that. We have multiple lists, we have multiple calendars, and we have built that over time to learn about what we need in order to function properly as whole adults. Students need the opportunity to build their skills and strategies and then get to the point of mastery to where they choose which one works for me. Okay? So if they aren't showcasing that they are at that super successful, responsible being yet, it's our responsibility as educators to help build that within them. Build that within them, okay? All right. Number 3, which is a 3-parter. So this is really 6 things. Okay, number 3. All right. Make your students your business. Make your students your business. It is your responsibility to build pathways for relationship building. Students aren't going to build relationships with you. You have to break the ice. You have to build relationships with them. Shameless plug here. Shameless plug. With this Rootwords-The Podcast, I realize that this doesn't happen automatically. Okay? So I have one resource, the Path to Meaningful Connections, that can help you warm up your relationships to get to the point where you have the conversations that the episodes are about, like legacy, like generosity, like we're talking about today with responsibility. Every episode comes with a questions to connections guide for you to think through your reflections, and then questions to ask kids to actually build your relationships in really meaningful, specific, intentional ways. So I give you all of that. You can drop me a DM with the fire emoji, and I'll shoot you the link so you can have all of the things. Okay? But I digress. It's our responsibility. Make your students your business. Your students are the content first and foremost. That is where all learning takes off from, and that's how students continue to tap in to you and your learning from there. All right. Manage your emotions. Manage your emotions, okay? Again, you have been through a lifetime of learning coping mechanisms, strategies, and skills to handle your ish when it pops up and creeps up on you. Okay? You know when you get stressed, okay, I got to go handle this. I have to call this person, relationship, right? I have to get my oxytocin hits in these ways. You know this, okay? So a student having an escalated state of mind and brain space needs those skills and strategies built. That's your responsibility. You're going to teach them those things. The kids spend most of their time with you. They spend most of their time with you. And so you need to build that. When you have those moments, that is the opportunity. That's the opportunity that you have to build those skills within your students. But here's the thing. Students have to return to a state of calm in order for their brains and bodies to be open to learning and also opening to reconnect with you again. State of calm. So in the moment of escalation, you can't be screaming at your students about the lunch bunch y'all was supposed to have or threatening to call their mama. They don't care. The brain doesn't care about that in those moments. You have to wait for a student to return to a sense of calm, to be open to connection and new learning. All right? Calm. Y'all have seen it. Y'all have seen it. A student's on 10 and then the teacher's on 10. I'm going to call your mother, trying to remind them of all the things. We're supposed to have lunch bunch, all of. They don't care about that. Not right now. Not right now. Okay? But when a student returns to a sense of calm, like, y'all get into all my PD content now. This is the stuff. This is my jam. So I mess around and give y'all my whole PD. Let me stay on track because I got to get Jocelynn on here so we can talk about responsibility. Okay. Later. I'm going to talk about that later. Okay. The last thing. And this is important. This connects to the whole purpose of root words, right? Speak promising and positive words over your students. Make that your responsibility. Make that your responsibility. As educators, our vocabulary has to extend far beyond the experiences and how our students show up. We have to be armed and ready with the vocabulary to describe the students that are in front of us in the moment. Okay? Calling out all of the skills that they're showcasing. Calling out all of the character building traits that they are showcasing. If you're out here teaching character traits of a story, of a character in a story, be able to use those character traits in talking about your students. That's the deep culturally responsive work right there. And I know Jocelynn gonna talk all about it. That's the sauce. That's the sauce and the connection. Like, we spend all our time learning academic content, applying that academic content and deep critical thinking to text, to all of this other stuff, and we aren't connecting that same content to the kids. To the kids, you know, to their lives, to their families, to their communities. How is it showing up? How is it showing up? Okay? That's our responsibility. So one way that I did this as an educator, I was a clipboard teacher. I was a clipboard teacher. I always carried a clipboard around. It was my jam, but it was a tool. It was a tool because it was my secret way to make sure I was armed with what I needed to say and speak over my students. So, and you can go on Pinterest. There are tons of them all over the place, but like lists of like 100 other words other than smart, 100 or 50 other words other than great that you can use with your students in a moment. So like I expanded my vocabulary. I had them there in front of me. I picked and I chose different things. Why is that important? Why is that important that we use and expand our vocabulary? Okay. You can call a kid smart, but imagine how it would hit different when they're called inquisitive, when they're called trustworthy, when they're called caring, when they're called curious, when they're called all of those more specific things. What does that do? Receipts. It gives our students the receipts and the evidence to attach to their character, who they are, who they know they are, right? We are co-writing. We are co-writing the narratives of our students with them by adding this vocabulary to their repertoire, okay? That is the source of self-advocacy, right? We all know about all of these different blooms and tech, all of this stuff, right? We know about the pedagogy. We know about building blocks. We know about all these skills that we want students to like ultimately get to. Self-advocacy being one of the highest skills to learn in any framework. What does it take if we backwards map self-advocacy? The vocabulary to speak on what you need, right? They need to get that from us. They need to hear those words washing over them all the time, right? Washing over our students, co-writing the narratives with them, okay? So they know who they are, whose they are. You know, shout out to my girl, Jody, right? Always reminding me of that. How do they know that? They have to hear it. They have to experience it. They have to feel it, okay? So that loops back to my bottom line, all right? The Root Words is my baby for that reason. This is how I get to pour more, just straight from the heart. I love storytelling. I love connecting in this way, and Root Words gives me that way to do it in a really structured way because I love structure too. Hello, Virgos out there. I love structure, so I like focusing my energy on one word, and this could be for you too. If you like, this week, I'm just focusing on responsible. How am I responsible? How am I teaching responsibility to my students? How am I helping build them up to be independent, responsible little beings? So they'll be independent, responsible big beings out in their communities. Do that, you know, and the Root Words is a way that we can just walk alongside you in building your capacity as educators, okay? This is something that Jody taught me, and, you know, she does live brunch Sundays, and she always starts with just some words to speak over her guests. And I was like, I love that. She did it for me, then I did it for her. So I want to continue that. And so this also adds to us getting more comfortable in the discomfort of hearing people speak about us and hearing words washing over us, which has historically just been really difficult for us people of color and us Black women.
Ready.
So just sit in it, sis.
I'm here for it. I'm ready. Okay.
Jocelynn, you are a phenomenon in my eyes. Another wonder of the world. As a one and most likely, very likely done mom, a one and done mom. You are incredible to your 5 kids and your husband. Your commitment to community allows for really special connections to blossom, where the people in your life feel supported and invigorated, but they also get to experience joyful collaboration in ways that hopefully serve you well as well. Yet, through all of the things that you do, you still find the courage and passion to lead your own business, Custom Teacher Solutions. And, you know, we've talked about the challenges and joys that come with that. You are one of 2 people that I have standing meetings with now because of the value that you provide and the synergy that you put out into the world, which I hope that nothing but more in abundance comes back to you and 10 times, 20 times, 100 times fold, because you truly, truly deserve it. You are a real one. And more importantly, I just thank you for taking the time out of your very busy schedule with all of the 5 kids to just in this conversation and just share your brilliance and all of the greatness and genius that you have with us.
Thank you. Yes, I receive it. Thank you so much. That was good for my soul.
Yes. Okay, so also wanted to share this little backstory on how we came into community together, which is really interesting. The timing on it. Because we're about to sprinkle grace all over this conversation, and it also applies to responsibility as well. Like, in knowing what your responsibility is and how you operate in the world, you also have to have grace on your shoulder at all times to kind of check yourself, if that makes sense. So like, you sent me a DM forever ago because you didn't even have your youngest baby, and your baby is walking. I just saw your baby is walking now. So it was a while ago, and it was so random but so touching that I immediately like recorded a story and posted your DM, because it had been probably a year since I had posted the first season of Root Words, and your DM was so kind. It was like, I love your podcast. When are you going to post some more episodes? And I was like, oh my,
I'm waiting.
I was like, oh my God. Like, I had been putting it off and putting it off and putting it off. And, this last year I had to keep putting it off for several various reasons, but it just touched me to that, because you were the first like active reminder that our impact is so important, but our consistency and our responsibility and how we show up is so important. It's so important, right? I hadn't experienced someone experiencing what I do that up close before in terms of podcast. And so that was just so special to me. And so like, we continue to just chop it up from there. Like, our communication hasn't stopped in the year plus now that we've known each other. And now we're just like collaborating it up nonstop.
All those connections, you just never know like how things are going to circle back around. So yeah.
Right. And we're in each other's lives for a reason. And one of these reasons is kind of like what we're talking about tonight. Right. So I just want to give you a chance just to like, talk a little bit about how you serve in this education space. I always apply in this series, I've applied it and attached it to a really deep question of like, what do you want to be remembered for? And now that I think about it, I like attaching those two together in terms of how do you serve and what do you want to be remembered for? Because they should be aligned, right?
Right. Right. So I am an educator, right? First and foremost, to my children. Like you said, I have 5 children. I am a wife, and I feel like that is a responsibility that I've been gifted. It's very challenging some days, very taxing, but also just like an amazing and awesome opportunity to see some of the things that I'm most passionate about up close and personal. Yeah. And my background is in secondary education, right? So I taught 7th and 8th grade language arts and social studies, but I work with teachers, infants, all the way up through 12th grade. So like this Friday, I'm working with, a preschool, infants through kindergarten. So because culturally relevant pedagogy is not limited to high school students, right? It's not limited to English.
That's right. And
so all of the things that all of the strategies that I advocate for teachers to use as they are vibing with culturally relevant pedagogy are the same strategies that I use with my own children. And it's like, if I have a 1-year-old all the way up to a 10-year-old. And so I've seen how these things work. Like essentially what I do is I work with teachers, and I work with school leaders to design a plan for how to best help their school utilize culturally relevant pedagogy, right? To help them to adapt to and navigate to all the cultural differences that they're seeing amongst the students in their population. And that is not limited to, we have Black, Mexican, Puerto Rican, whatever. If you have students in your building, they're culturally diverse. And so that's always the conversation.
Yeah. Nice. What do you want to be remembered for?
Right. What I want to be, I want to be remembered for fun. honestly, like when I lead workshops, one of my main goals is to make them interactive and fun. I felt like I was a fun teacher. Like my goal every day going into the classroom, yes, it was to educate my students, but it was to have fun with them. I wanted them to see that this thing could be fun. And it's the same way when I'm working with educators. Like I want them to have fun. I play music, we do giveaways, but we get that work done.
Yeah.
That's what I want to remember.
That is so true. And I also like, I know in my sessions as well, I constantly like talk to educators about like reflect on, well, here's a lot, like reflect on your why, like why, what's your why? But what's your why? We want to know that, yes, that is true. But it's like, once you do that work, realize that you didn't put in all of this work to get where you are, to check your identity and what you want out of this experience at the door.
Yep.
Like, yep. You know what I mean? Like describe the classroom that you want, your ideal classroom. And like, it's fun. It's a good time up in there. It's a good time.
It's for me.
So don't put that at the door because of any other factors, whether it's a teacher across the hall that's like, don't smile till November type stuff, like whatever
right.
it is. Like, no, bring your full self and how you have fun into the learning. And that's only going to funnel into your students.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Man.
Yep.
Okay, let's get into this responsibility. So when you think about the word responsibility, what comes up for you? What bubbles up to the surface?
So much. I mean, obviously you and I were messaging earlier this week.
Yes.
And so I've been really like sitting with this word, and I went back and I listened to those 2 podcast episodes again so that I could remember, exactly what you were saying. But the first word for me that attaches to the word responsibility is mindfulness. And that's the reason I say that is because I feel like in order to truly be responsible, you have to be mindful of your surroundings. You have to be mindful of and in tune with yourself and your feelings and your emotions, and be mindful of, of all of the resources that you have and the opportunities that are presented to you, right? So that's what I think of initially when I think of the word responsibility. Yes,
that is so true. You want to share what we were going through earlier this week? I feel like it's important.
Sure.
It's important for 2 reasons. Because remember, like I said, with responsibility and having that conversation also comes with a lot of grace.
Mm-hmm.
Grace for ourselves, grace for people that we're in community with. And I think, we can hold people accountable, and like, integrity is super important to me. But in leading with integrity, I also lead with grace. And so that is also a part of the equation. So do you want to share what we were going through?
Sure, absolutely. I'm completely transparent. So as an aside, right, as a digression, I was getting these edges rebraided the other day, and I was talking with the lady who braids my hair. Like, this is not the first time I've been with her. She's like, oh, I know you've got all these kids and you've been married for a long time. I've been married for 12 years, and she's getting ready to get married in April. And she just said, she's like, I just feel like everybody that I talk to about marriage is not real. Like, they're just not authentic. And, or it's like, well, we went through it and you can get through it too. Like, you'll be fine. And she's like, that's not helpful. That's not helpful at all. And I said, listen, if ever you want an honest and transparent, sharing of experiences, you just call me, sis. Like, you just call me, because I'm happy to let you know the real. So anyway, so my family and I are getting ready to move, and it has been like a crazy whirlwind. As you can imagine, like, moving in general is exhausting, and trying to do that with 5 children, with a husband who travels, with myself having my own business, like, just all the things were like crashing down on me. And so I messaged you and I said, I don't know if I can do this. Like, I don't know if I can do this live on Wednesday. Like, I'm trying to be mindful of my capacity. I'm trying to be mindful of my space, and whether I will be able to bring my full self to this experience. Because obviously, I love your podcast. I respect you, right? I respect myself, and I respect everybody that's joining us tonight. And I feel like it is my responsibility to be honest with you about this. And you were just like, Jocelynn, I hear you. I get it. Like, I can reach out to some other people. You know what I mean? Like, we can figure this thing out. Yeah. So then I sat with it and I said, ooh, wait a minute now. is that really what I wanted? Like, do I really want to step away from this opportunity to talk about a word that is so key in everything, like in all of the things that I do professionally and personally?
Yeah.
And so then I messaged you again, and I said, I think I want to do this, right? Like, the reason why we are doing this is because it's important, and there's joy here. And I know that every time you and I converse, like, I'm always lighter after we talk, right? Like, I'm always lifted. I'm always in a much better space. And so I'm like, of course, chatting with you, whether it's like our personal conversation or live for everybody to hear, it's going to lift. It's going to lift. And so here we are.
Yeah.
Here we are chit-chatting about this word. But I felt like that is a part of what I mentioned before, like that mindfulness and being responsible as educators, as parents, as people in this world. Like, we have a responsibility to ourselves first. They always say, like, you cannot pour from an empty cup. So I have to be responsible to myself and my emotions and my feelings. Otherwise, how can I do this work? I don't care what the work, I can't do any work unless I check in on myself first.
Listen, several things. First of all, what was modeled, like I said, there's grace there, right? But with grace, there's trust, right? So if we hadn't built a trusting relationship, you wouldn't have felt as comfortable being your full authentic self.
Yep.
That is the same exact thing that is required in our classrooms.
Yes.
Imagine our situation as a teacher-student situation. I was getting goosebumps when you were talking, because I was like, oh my gosh, the opportunity for a kid to experience that level of grace.
Yep.
How often would a kid experiencing that level of grace respond in the same way you did?
Right.
Response in overwhelm, response in fear is quick, it's reactive, right? Sometimes we react to the quick reactive, bam. We make judgment, we make assumptions about our students, when all they need is a moment of grace to gather themselves, to be poured into intentionally and positively about their abilities, right? But give them the space to get back on board with it on their own terms, with the understanding that they have a trusting adult that is going to take them where they need to go. That's going to be what they need to get. You know what I mean? Oh my God,
yeah, absolutely.
That's
so, like, you said it's what?
That's equity.
Well.
That is equity.
Well, and so that's the thing that I like about your work, right? And in the conversations that we have, and why I felt like it was important to hop on here, right? And all the conversations that you've been having the past few weeks, because I feel like people have, and I'm using this very broadly, but there's like this very narrow understanding of some of these buzzwords, right? Equity, diversity, cultural, like all of these things. Like it's such a narrow understanding and a narrow scope. And I'm just like, can we open our minds, please? Can we expand our thinking and understand? Because it's so much more. Like, it's not just the little boxes that you set out and I need to now go check them.
Yeah.
Everything, so much more.
Yes. It's applying it to the humanity of it all, right?
Right.
It's like we're whole adults, human people that started as kids, dang it.
Oh my gosh. Yes. Which is the thing that being a mom continues to remind me. And I have my sweater on today that says mom mode, because I've been full in it today. But like watching my kids, I'm just like, oh my gosh. And like you said, I mean, that thing hit when you said we can't just walk up to a 10-year-old and say, well, you should know this. Well, you should be able to do this. Because how are they supposed to just know? And I'm guilty of it, right? Good gracious, like, you should just know to pick your clothes out. Why should they just know this? There was this other lady that I used to follow a while ago, and she gave her children certificates once she taught them how to do a certain chore. So now they were certified to complete the task. I said, that is brilliant. Because now you can say, because you've gone through this training, now you can be responsible for handling the task.
Come on.
Because I trained you.
Come
I
on.
showed you. I coached you up.
Come on. Come on. Look, look, when we apply equity across all the facets of our lives, that is when we are truly preparing our students to be free.
Yes.
To be free, right? To be critical thinkers, to be strong, to find strength in community, in themselves, because they know that they're getting what they need. And when I say that that's equity, it's like equity isn't just this social, political, very like, it's not just that. Equity starts with self. And that's a lot of talking about the past few weeks, right? Knowing what you value, deeply doing the work to know what you need, to be able to communicate that out, right? There's babies around, they don't have that ability so early to communicate what they need. It requires attuned and responsive adults, right?
Yep.
And grace. Adults that lead with grace and compassion, right? To know that they're in a process of learning, but with the equity mindset that I'm going to give each and every one of these kids in my sphere of control exactly what they need.
Wait a minute. What they need, what each child needs, right?
Each and every one of them, right?
I'm not lumping them together.
Not what a third grader needs, not what a third grader should be able to do. Context. Every single child comes with different experiences, relationships, and environments tapped in.
Absolutely. Yes,
so the blanket of equality doesn't serve my students. It doesn't serve them. It doesn't serve them well, right?
And that's where we have to start. Like you said, that's where we got to start.
So this makes the connection I was talking about it earlier to the cultural responsiveness and how watered down we are making it in these streets. Not we. Let me take us out of it. Folks are making it in these streets. Like, it's real cute. It's real cute. The books are cute. But what are you going to do once you're done with that read aloud? You turn that last page, you close that book of that read aloud with those black and brown characters in it. How does that live? How does it live?
Where does it sit? Okay. How does it land? Because, I cannot tell you how many times I have talked to educators, right, to school leaders who are just like, oh my gosh, if I see another professional learning session where they've slapped culturally relevant pedagogy on and I attend it and there's literally nothing in there, not even a definition, right? Like, how is this relevant to anything? So, and look, there are people that have done some amazing work and research, and those books, they are a great starting place and a great foundation. But like you said, you cannot just sit on the book and say, oh, I've read it now. I've closed that book, and now what? Or now you've done the book and you want to, call someone in for like a one and done type session where we chit chat for 30 minutes or whatever.
Right.
Also not going to go ahead and be what's going to shift and move the needle. Like, we need to dig in. We need to dig in and we need to understand that that there's real work to be done. And it does start with self. Like, that is literally where I start, is with self-reflection. Because if you don't understand yourself first and all the pieces that you bring to the table, then how are you going to understand anybody else, right? It's just, again, it goes back to responsibility. I have a responsibility to know myself first so I can see where my blind spots are. And, oh gosh, Jocelynn, because once we get started, it just comes. The other thing that I'm just gonna go ahead and say it, is that, we, even as Black and brown people, right, we need to do the work too, because me and my sister chat about this all the time, that Black people are not all the same.
No.
And so I need to also be doing the work to see where my biases land.
Yeah.
How am I showing up in this classroom as a Black woman for my Black students?
Right.
Like, I have to do some self-reflection too.
Right.
Exactly. We are not exempt. Okay. We are not. And so that is literally one of my key sticking points, is always, look, y'all, like, I'm doing this work too. In order to facilitate this work, I have to do the work. right?
Yeah.
I have to do the work. And yeah, that is a part of that responsibility all day. All day.
My goodness. It is so true. And when I was thinking about like the cultural responsiveness, I know that's your whole wheelhouse. I'm like, and it leads to my next question. Like, I really wish I had this deep level of reflection and unpacking what I value, the unlearning phenomenon that's happening now, based on unfortunate events, honestly.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
I just so wish I can go back with that level of reflection embedded in, because like culturally responsiveness, I know I did a lot of it innately, so just because I wanted to share so much of myself.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I realized that I couldn't ask students to meet me in the space of like academic learning unless we shared ourselves, you know? And so it's like, what did I value and how do I share that with my students? And then how do I empower them to do the same, to where we're constantly making connections to the world around us and our bigger picture. Like,
absolutely,
my students knew that I wasn't always going to be a teacher. Like, I had aspirations. I shared that with them, you know? It was the most important thing I was doing right now, but they knew that impact was so important and that they have the power to impact in whatever way best suits them. Like, that's open. And we saw that in every book. We saw it in every like math standard. Like, how will we make this work for us? Like, it's not about this textbook. Y'all not even gonna think about this textbook when y'all are gone. Like, what is it gonna mean to you? You know?
Right. And so whenever anybody asks me where to start, I try to make it digestible, right? And like simple. And so it's always with three questions.
Yeah.
What are my students learning about themselves? What are my students learning about their peers, locally, nationally, globally? And what are my students learning about the world around them, right? And so much of that comes from the research that I've done and the books that I've read and the things that I know that these teachers are doing and reading and that they're hearing. And so it's like, okay, how do I distill this down into one little nugget that you can carry with you? Because like you said, it's literally not about these textbooks. I cannot tell you what I learned in function, statistics, and trigonometry. Like, I have no idea. The only thing I remember from my physics class was that my teacher wore these tight brown black pants every single day. And that was it. Like, he was hilarious. And he like was just like, you better sit down and do this worksheet. You know what I mean? So how are we connecting all of these things to the world around to the world around us? And that's what I'm saying. Like, this starts all the way down from infants all the way up to us as adults. Like, when I look at my baby, at my daughter, I've been teaching her sign language since she was 4 months old.
Right.
And so when you tell me as an educator, like, oh, they don't, you know, it's just so much, it's over their heads. It's not. They are absorbing all of it. All of it. How do I connect everything? That's my responsibility.
Single thing. Like, my dog was like, sound off, sis.
Say that.
Yeah, he was like, yeah, oh, sound off. He's like, he's quiet until he hears somebody in the hallway. Then he's like, oh, let me protect the place for you. That's his responsibility.
Right. There it is. He understood the assignment.
Listen. This was the other thing. And if you have anything else that like, oh man, if I like went back, I wish I knew this when I was an educator. This was one thing that stood out to me. Like, you know, when you really in the work, you can't listen to anything without being like set on fire. And I was listening to the Lunchroom Cypher podcast. And we need to talk about your podcast too. Don't let me forget. And you know, my boy Chris Ibden was on there dropping some knowledge. This is like their second episode, and he said one thing that really stood out to me, and it goes with this question, because I wish I had such a finite understanding of mastery, even as an educator. I'm like, I've made it as an educator if I reach this point. Oh, win teacher of the year, and now I'm like, I've made it. I know all there is to know about teaching third or fourth grade, whatever, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Tap into like the continuous learning, the pursuit of learning that never stops, though. Like, what else can you absorb? Who else can you get in community with that could really just continue the learning and the movement forward past your own sphere of control? Like, and he mentioned the word research, and it blew my mind. He's like, you know, research, right? Yeah, like research, search again, continue to search. So we hear all the time, like, be a student of your students, like be a student of your craft. but we never think about the continuous learning that has to occur. Search again, go deeper, do it again.
Go deeper.
What else do you notice? How else can you contribute? How can you, like, it's the continuous cycle of learning. And I wish I knew that earlier, because I would have been in community with people even deeper, and then doing this work just at a level that was so meaningful that I knew without a doubt it was attached to the legacy of myself, my kids, and all those educators that have come in contact with me. Like, that's what I wish I knew. You know what I mean? So what do you wish you knew before, you know, you were an educator?
You know, ooh, goodness.
It's deep, right?
It is deep. And I wish I knew more about limitless potential. So even though I would advocate for my students to be all that they could be, I didn't own that for myself, if that makes sense. Like, I never even dreamed that I would be doing what I'm doing right now. I loved teaching, and I thought about other things that I could do in education, but it wasn't tangible. And
Yep. I concur. So that's like, those are parallel experiences in different ways. It's like I didn't know what it was. I just knew that I was called to make a larger impact in the education space. I didn't know what it was. That is the power of community. And it's our responsibility to put ourselves out there and find those trusting relationships that you can build with. Because like I mentioned in the first episode, that is the prism in which we see the possibilities.
Yes. You
know what I mean?
And you know what? I think that, like you were saying, when we're in community, then people are speaking into. They recognize sometimes the things that we don't see within ourselves. And things like you being teacher of the year, like, those were all seeds that were being planted.
Yeah.
I mean, so I was a third-year teacher, and someone from the state came, because our school was a Title I school and we were struggling to make gains and all this other stuff. Yep. They came, and they were sitting in all the classrooms. They came and sat in my classroom. A week later, they came back, sat in my classroom. Hey, do you mind? No, my door is always open. Like, right. What else? Yeah, I've literally, there's nothing to hide here. It's an open book. Come back a week later. A week later, I get a phone call. Jocelynn, we would like for you to do a presentation on the state level about da-da-da-da-da. What? Like, I'm a third-year teacher. What are you even saying to me? And then, but then that literally went out of my mind. Like, I didn't realize some of what other people were seeing in me and the potential that they were seeing in me. Yeah.
And that is like, it's so funny. All of these themes, like, connecting to each other, like being in community, your community being generous about what they see in you and how they pour into you, how they speak over you when you're around the people, right? They don't take from that energy, they contribute to it. And so, like, it's mutually beneficial. I keep saying mutually beneficial relationships out here. How do we pour into each other? But then, all of that also applies to the responsibility. Like you said, it starts with self and what you believe you deserve, what you believe you value, before you can build and be responsible for student contributors, right? Like, what are your, like, cultural contributions? What do you value about your own, like, what is around you in your sphere of culture and family and community? And that is what you add to the equation as a model for students to participate in their cultural surroundings, social surrounding. Everything kind of adds as a model. So, like, they all kind of tie in, but the theme throughout is self.
It starts with self,
right? And so
absolutely,
I encourage everyone to, like, whenever you see all of the framework, all of the research, right? You research again, you search again and again, and you find deeper connections to yourself and the work. That is how we move it forward, and then share.
Yep.
Don't
And then
do
share.
it in silo, right? And then share what you know and the connections that you make. And that's how, you know, we become this sort of catalyst for change. Like things become perpetual, you know? So yeah, so let's wrap up. I know Bobby's coming on Liberation Lab, and I love to be a part of that audience as well. That's how the community works. We're like, oh, 6 o'clock, you on at 7?
Right.
You on at 8? Yeah, we like to wrap up so people can get to where, you know, they want to go and contribute to as well. So let people know like how they can get in touch with you, what's going on for you. Drop the podcast, which is amazing. So they can go have a listen, all of the things.
Sure. So my Instagram handle is at I Teach Custom, but the business is actually called Custom Teaching Solutions. My name is Jocelynn Hubbard, and I have the podcast that I started. It is called The Culture Centered Classroom. So you can listen to that. It drops every Wednesday at 6 a.m. I have a new episode, but I've got my website, customteachingsolutions.com. Professionally, I lead workshops and just trainings for educators and school leaders so that they can tap into self, right? So that they can create these spaces that are much more welcoming and inclusive and accepting and just fuller, richer, safer, so that children can show up as their authentic selves, but also so teachers can show up as their authentic selves and everybody can have the best learning experience possible. That's me.
Can I just say really quick, before we hop off, because it just hit me while you were talking. We are very different in our approach, and it is so awesome. So awesome. Like I know I'm very and I'm the same way in my sessions. I'm very high energy, like coming like this, and like the work that you do requires that like inner self. And I know this is big time. This is big mom energy that comes through, but it comes through in how you speak because it makes people feel like I want to do the work. Like I do want to do. So when you say like you make it digestible, but it's real. Like you don't take away from what you're doing. It's full sustenance. Like it's there. You're not diluting anything, but you do it in a way that people kind of open hearts to. And I don't know if anyone's ever told you that, but your demeanor that you bring to the work, that it adds to your whole identity of like you as a mom right into the work. That's what people need. Sometimes people need big mama energy in order to really disarm, you know?
Right. Yeah. And I mean, I try to do it that way because self-reflection in general can be challenging. Like it is challenging to acknowledge some of the things that we become aware of, whether they're good or bad, right? Like sometimes I recognize a strength within myself that scares me.
Yeah.
Or sometimes there's a weakness that's right. So it's like self-reflection is not good or bad. It just is, but it does take a level of like comfort and a feeling of safety to truly dive into that reflection that we need to do to understand ourselves so that we can continue to dive in and do the work and continue to research. I love that. I'm pulling that. I go listen to that episode.
Yes. Okay, sis. Thank you so much for joining. Like, with so many gems dropped, and like you lead with grace, and you show the model of like being courageous and showing up and doing the work. And there's so many special little nuggets that I can't wait for people to engage with, you know, when they watch this back, and we post it all over all of the things. I'm going to give you back to your family now. I know as soon as you walk in the door, the kids going to be like, oh, what was you doing out there? Because they nosy. The kids are nosy. You know they are.
They are so nosy. Mom.
They are so precious. But I thank you, and I will see you soon.
All right. This was fun. Thank you.